Hello, everyone. Welcome to PopCultX Little Talks. It's our conversation series where we chat with a wide variety of creative-minded people. Today, we're delighted to be joined by Matt Goodwin, a professor in the Department of Chicana and Chicano Studies at the University of New Mexico. He's also the author of LatinX Files, Race, Migration, and Space Aliens, the editor of LatinX Rising, and the co-editor of Speculative Fiction for Dreamers, among other books, which we'll get into as well, I'm sure. But Matt, thanks for taking some time to chat with us today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. This is great.
Yeah, it's really cool. I think we met. I saw you through social media, which is great, on Instagram. And what really stuck out to me when I first looked at your profile was this book that you had, which was the LatinX Rising. Mm-hmm. And I was like, wow, what is that? Because it just, just the name just enthralled me. And then I looked into what it was, and it's science fiction fantasy set in the Latin world. Yeah, which is something that my co-host Gabe and I always talk about that we don't get enough of. Mm-hmm. And so I guess we'll do a little bit of back origin story for you. Sure. How did you get into I guess editing, writing? What is your origin story into this creative world?
Yeah, it's like, I mean, of course it's a funny story. So before going to like graduate school to study like U.S. Latinx literature, mm-hmm. I spent a long time doing legal aid for like immigration, and working with a nonprofit agency that helps people get green cards or whatever. Yeah. And so one of the things I started to notice was that people really did not understand how completely insane the immigration bureaucracy is. It's like it's really like you have to go to science fiction or fantasy or Kafka or something to try to explain what it is like. And so I started to kind of make some connections. And so when I went to graduate school and was studying the literature, and I wasn't finding a whole lot of that. Yeah. And of course there's magical realism and a lot of, like social protest kind of literature, urban mm-hmm. tales of poverty. And it wasn't really getting to that kind of extremity and ability to express the surrealism and insanity of the bureaucracy. So I kind of started down that road, and there were a couple of things kind of that had come out. There was Ernest Hogan. He's a writer, a Chicano writer in Arizona. He has a couple of novels that came out. Cortez on Jupiter is one of them that I really like. Around that time, also, there's a novel called Ink by Sabrina Vorvalius that came out, which basically takes the immigration bureaucracy and extrapolates out into the future to see what would happen if it became really dystopian. Right. And it's a really fantastic novel. I actually reread it recently, and it's a really fantastic novel. The thing is that since that time, immigration bureaucracy kind of became somewhat dystopian, and in terms of the public, in terms of the view of the mainstream. But so there were a couple of bits, here and there coming out. So I decided to write my dissertation on it. And but then after that, I realized that would kind of get lost a little bit because there was no anthology, no place for people to start. Right. And not just like professors, but just readers, anybody interested mm-hmm. in the topic. And so I was like, okay, I think I need to do an anthology of fiction. How do I do that? I have no idea. So, as often in my life, I just kind of jump into something and it took a while to figure out, like not knowing anything about the publishing world. I mean, knowing something about literature, but
Yeah.
not knowing the publishing world at all, really. We had to do a Kickstarter, because the authors were really interested, and so LatinX Rising was really trying to get a lot of the key authors who had been in that history, and then some of the new writers as well, so Daina Chaviano, who was a Cuban writer who came to the U.S., she'd been writing science fiction and fantasy for decades. And then there's like writers like Richie Narvaez, who was relatively new, and so that's sort of what we were going for with LatinX Rising. But of course, there wasn't like a big publisher interested, and I wasn't like an expert. I didn't have an agent. I didn't know any of that stuff. Luckily, we found a small press, so we did a Kickstarter, got through a small press, and that came out. Cool. Eventually, over time, that press, that independent press, fell. They closed the doors, and we ended up with Ohio State University Press, which is where Speculative Fiction for Dreamers was published as well.
Very cool. Very cool. Now, have you always been interested in writing or reading science fiction or fantasy? Has it always been something that's, as a kid, that you gravitated to?
Yeah, it's interesting because I do get that question a lot, and it's kind of mixed. So yes, I definitely, as a kid, I read some science fiction and fantasy, and but honestly, that wasn't people. I guess what I'm saying is sometimes people assume that I'm coming from like science fiction fantasy interest, and then trying to apply that to Latin America or U.S. Latinos or whatever, and it's actually the reverse. And so I did have some of the background, but at the same time, I'm also critical of like mainstream science fiction, and in a way that sort of helped me get some perspective on this work and what I'm doing and where people are coming from. And because it really, I mean, one of the things that's interesting to me is that a lot of the writers in these anthologies, they come from a wide variety of backgrounds, and it also in terms of generations. So, Daina Chaviano, she came from Cuba directly. Of course, there's writers in New Mexico who come from families who've been here generations and generations. Same in California, and of course, Mexican American is the strongest community in the Southwest, but you go to the East Coast, and then it's Puerto Rico and Cuba, and so really was trying to get all of these things in, and that's the perspective I was coming from, and like I said, trying to get at that experience of immigration and being bilingual or bicultural or dislocated and using science fiction tropes to get at that.
That's cool. I mean, I see with the book you wrote, the LatinX Files, which is the race, migration, and space aliens. Seems like that's where you're really hitting on those topics of immigration and using how science fiction authors use that as a tool for in just as a horror element or as a tool to show how immigrants are the aliens, right?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No. I mean that's totally was my initial interest, and that was a question I pursued for 15 years or whatever. I think I'm kind of done with that. Like, not that it's a question that needs to be done, but I am kind of like, working on next projects. I'm at a transition point, but
Okay.
one of the things that came out of that book is really that if you look at U.S. Latinx literature and U.S. Latinx science fiction, there is that element where there is a correlation between the immigrant and the space alien, but it is not in any way the whole story.
No.
Right. Sometimes, the space alien is like an enlightened being, that kind of common in 50s, 60s, like films where the alien comes down and like tells everyone, to stop making nuclear bombs. And
yeah,
it's a little bit like that. So that really has nothing to do with immigration per se. And so that kind of figure does appear in Latinx science fiction. Horror as well. There's in LatinX Rising, there's a Junot Diaz story called Monstro, where there's a kind of like alien, like fungus or something that comes from outer space. And so there's horror as well. There's and drawing on the history of the Caribbean, the history of Latin America, and so there is that connection that I think is really important between the immigrant and the space alien, and trying to piece that apart. But it turns out the space alien can do a lot of work, can bring in a lot of different topics.
Yeah, very true. Very true. You said you were in a transition phase. So what's the next project or step that you're working towards right now then?
Yeah. So I finished the Latinx Files, working on another fiction anthology. But in terms of like my research and what I'm thinking about, honestly, I'm grappling, but to try to express it, which I haven't really talked to many people about it. I'm looking at works that cross the boundaries between like art and politics.
Oh, okay.
Something in that realm. So, for example, there's an artist called Adal from Puerto Rico, and he's a really great artist. Passed away a couple of years ago. And he created a Puerto Rican passport, which there are no Puerto Rican passports because they're citizens.
Right.
So he created this art object that became part of this fantasy world of El Spirit Republic de Puerto Rico, the Spirit Republic. And that passport was put in museums and exhibited, and as part of the a whole kind of array of different art objects and pictures and photographs. But it was also used to get into different countries, Colombia, a variety of countries in the Caribbean, and it has a domino. I don't know if you can see the poster. This is from the Spirit Republic. That's the map of the Spirit Republic of Puerto Rico, a big domino. And on the Puerto Rican passport, there's a big, huge domino, and inside there's like a picture of a gallo. So it's clearly like not a real passport.
Right.
So, but there were a number of people who used it as a passport, and I find that so fascinating. And was the official like in on the game? Were they being, careless?
Gotcha.
And so that moment where art jumps out of the museum and starts to do stuff in the world, and I'm drawn to it. And another kind of example, a little bit different, is the TV show Los Spookies. I don't know if you've seen that.
I've heard of it. I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard of it. Yeah.
Yeah, you definitely should watch it. You'll like it. It's a really good show. And it's basically a group of young people who are kind of not finding a good job or finding their way. And so they create like a group that puts on a real life kind of like horror situation. And
Okay.
so
That sounds cool. Yeah.
yeah, so they went to this one town and they created like a monster so that the town would start to get tourists in the town. And so that and is something in that range as well, where the speculative kind of like comes to life. They have
Gotcha.
these
Okay.
like these kind of like storylines, but they're not just writing it and containing it. The story kind of jumps out into the world and starts to act politically or socially, at the very least. But that kind of thing where it's a little bit hard to tell if it's art or politics or
right
art or something else. Yeah.
Well, those two topics you mentioned are similar. I mean, if you look at it, they're both artwork, right? That are coming to real life or jumping it, like you said, into the real world. So I think that's really cool. That is a fascinating topic, definitely.
Yeah.
Would you say, I guess, as an editor or a curator, I guess, would you call yourself a curator of different stories for the anthologies, right?
Sure. Yeah.
What would you say are like the biggest challenges of bringing in these stories together to create this novel or book that you really want people to read?
Yeah, I actually really love that part. So yeah, the first LatinX Rising I did on my own. The second one I did with two friends, Sarah Rafael Garcia and Alex Hernandez, and that was like a really, really cool experience in terms of collaborating, because we kind of all were in sync in terms of what we were looking for, what we were choosing. Then the third one, Not Your Puppy's Utopia, is we added Sarah Rivera, who lives here in Albuquerque as well. So it's, but the selection process, I think it's so. I mean, first of all, you get to read all these stories that are new.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really a great thing, and most of the time, all of them are like good, I mean, it's really rare that there's one that's just like horrible or something. I can't even think of.
I haven't submitted mine yet, I guess. No.
Exactly. Yeah. We're waiting. No, and I'm not a fiction writer as well. I mean, I'm not. I'm not. It's it's a particular skill, but yeah. So that part, just that kind of like, wow, this is a great story. It's new. It's out of the blue. But when you're making an anthology, it's not just that, because there in LatinX Rising, I don't know, there's 22 or something stories, but there was probably 50 that could have gone in, and so there it's like. Are we representing the kind of topic in its diversity, not only speculative fiction, but also media? Like for me, it's really important to bring in art and poetry and plays,
cool.
Which we did a lot better for in speculative fiction for Dreamers. There's a couple of plays, a couple of comics, a number of different poems. For me, that's really important because the speculative appears in all kinds of medium and media and genre. So that's the other one. You have to get all the different media and genre, diversity of the community, of the different Latinx communities in the U.S. from different parts of the country, and then even after that, there is an intuition. At the end of the day, you have to have. And this is where the kind of like creative element comes in some ways more clearly. I mean, the choosing, of course, is a creative part as well. but there is this intuitive part that you have to like be responsive to and say, this story, it's a great story, it fits, but it's not working in this anthology, or this one is it's sort of like this other one, but we need it. We need this one for some magical reason. And really there is like an intuitive, non-rational part that I think you have to have, or it's not curating, it's
right,
like
exactly.
Yeah,
the collection of stuff.
Yeah, just like a curator in a museum, you have to like rely on your feeling about it as much as your desire for the diversity of the topic and the quality of the work and all of that. So I really like it for that reason, the whole editing, curating thing, because it does involve these different elements. And at the end of the day, it's really nice to have partners on this. So I am really happy to be working with 4 other people on this, because it's I mean, the other part is that it is a lot of responsibility.
Yeah.
In the sense of people get upset, if you don't take their work, and which I obviously totally understand. Like I wouldn't have accepted my own work. So yeah, it can be a little bit difficult in that way. And actually for LatinX Rising, I told everyone, if you're interested, you can call me and we can talk about it, and I can try to explain why that particular work didn't get in. And almost certainly it wasn't because it was a bad story. And out of that, I actually was able to talk to a number of different writers, and that was really cool. When that happened, cool. That was really cool, because it was like, obviously I'm not trying to put anybody's work down,
Right.
And so yeah, I enjoyed that a lot. There was actually one author who didn't go in the first one, but did go in the second one. And they sort of revised their story and submitted it to the second one, and it got in. And it's an incredible story. So I love the process, honestly. Yeah,
that's cool. And these authors are getting free editorial advice from you. So hey, win-win.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's not a lot of money in any of this.
Right.
I'm not making money. They're making very little money. I mean, we do pay them, but it's not like no one's making rent.
Right. It's for the love of it, of course. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Yeah, but honestly, most people don't want to talk to us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a difficult situation. It's because it's a creative expression. It comes out of people's hearts, and so if someone rejects it, then it feels like you're rejecting them.
Yeah. I hear you. I mean,
especially for young writers.
Yeah, it's true.
I think older writers couldn't care less. So.
It's about learning to what the feedback you're given, and maybe it's not negative, but just learning how to accept that feedback and use it to better your work or grow from it. So yeah,
and I mean I guess the thing that people really don't think too much about is the part that there were 50 great stories and we could only take a certain amount because otherwise the publisher wouldn't take it.
Yep.
And we, and so you just have to do that. The other thing is, so I teach literature, and the biggest thing that students have to learn is to edit their work. And I'm not even talking about creative writing. I'm talking about just writing essays about novels and short stories. I think students are kind of used to just like writing what they think, and there it is, and like, it's the night before and there's no time and here you go. But the way to become a good writer is to learn how to edit your own work. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that takes me giving them feedback, and sometimes it takes a partner or a colleague, a buddy from class, to give them feedback. So I try to make in my classes, I try to like make a lot of opportunities where they get feedback, and the essay can go over the course of a couple of weeks, and they get a lot of feedback, because that's how you become a writer. That's a good writer. And then eventually you sort of incorporate that into your thinking, so that, as you're writing, you're sort of responding to what you think will be the feedback,
Interesting. Okay.
But on the other hand, there it's a little more like ego, Sometimes if you give some criticism, people don't like it, which again, I also understand. I don't want to get criticism. So that's why and that's where it's my job to make a safe environment.
Yeah.
So that if I give feedback, there's a good chance that they're going to take it okay and not be totally upset.
Very cool. That was going to be my next question, was what kind of advice would you give to a young writer? But you've already answered it, so we'll move on.
Oh, well, in terms of like creative writing, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't have any advice that, other people haven't given 1,000 times and mm-hmm. and better and with more experience. But yeah, if I had to give advice to someone, I would say, yeah, you have to take time and, like put it down for a week if you can. And come back to it and read it like it was somebody else's story, and then just destroy it, and that's how to do it.
Yeah.
Now maybe there's some people who just are like geniuses, and it just flows out of them, and I think there are those people. Mm-hmm. But a lot of myself and a lot of people I know are not like that. And we have to like edit, we go back and like, yeah. So
yeah, I hear you. I want to talk about your new anthology that you're currently taking submissions for real quick. And that's LatinX Visions. What can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay. Well, so there's a couple things going on. One is Not Your Poppy's Utopia.
Okay.
That's the fiction anthology that we had a call for stories, and we're reading now those stories.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and those are really fantastic, because with that one, we're really trying to get stories that are kind of a little bit hopeful, or at the very least are getting out of the dystopian turn in culture that we've been in for a couple of decades. and just to see what we get. And it turns out we've gotten some kind of amazing stuff. So that makes me very happy. The LatinX Visions was actually a conference we had in March.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And it was really kind of the first time that the teachers and professors and students and artists and writers interested in LatinX speculative fiction have gotten together. There have been little things over the years, and maybe like a panel on, at a con or an academic convention, but this is where a lot of us got together, and it was pretty amazing in that way. And so I'm very proud of that, and we're gonna kind of keep going, and we'll do one in a couple years. And so out of that, we decided to do an anthology of essays about Latinx speculative fiction. So that will, yeah, we're getting those in January.
Okay.
So yeah, that's it. And honestly, that right there is a kind of like example of my work, because I do a lot with the creative world and with fiction writers, and I really enjoy working with authors and artists. But I'm also in academia, you know, and I enjoy that side as well, the coming up with theories about the field. And, you know, for example, in the LatinX files, some of the stories that I was writing about and thinking about were stories from LatinX Rising, and stories that I maybe edited or translated. And so, you know, I'm not in any way objective. You know, of course I try to kind of like step back and think about it kind of objectively to a degree. But all of this stuff, you know, like editing, translating, writing essays, and it's all wrapped up for me. It's all wrapped up together. And yeah, it makes it a little bit kind of complicated and sometimes, and I have to be a little bit careful sometimes. But I love it. I love that. I love that going back and forth.
Yeah, that's cool. I can see that. I mean, just the connection between the two is really fascinating to me. I mean, growing up I'm biracial, but I didn't really have much cultural upbringing from either of my heritages. So really, when I started doing this show and I started talking with a lot of Latino creative people, it really sparked like an interest in want to learn more about it. So it's just been really fascinating for me. It's been really cool to talk to people like yourself who just bring a different angle to all the different creativity that's out there.
Yeah.
Well, we are a pop culture show at the root of what we do. So I like to ask all of our guests what they're currently watching, reading, listening to, that they can share with us or would like to share with us.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's see. Well, I mean, I saw Blue Beetle. Okay. I know you had a show on it. I wasn't able to watch it. So maybe you can tell me what you think about Blue Beetle. I would be interested. But I mean, I think it was fantastic. I think it was really amazing. And there was this concern that you know, they took the comic, which was set in El Paso, and then, you know, brought it into this kind of abstract, non-existent city. But I mean, that was what the film was doing, though, which was making a really a Mexican-American centered story at the border, and making it Latinx.
Yeah.
And, you know, the director is Puerto Rican. I mean, it's still set in Texas, but it references Guatemala, you know, they're at Central America, and you know, the dirty wars of Central America, Puerto Rico, Cuba, you know, Chicanos. I mean, it really, for me, I liked it personally for that specific reason. And it probably, you know, they did it for money reasons as well.
Yeah.
You know, to be a little bit cynical, you know, just to kind of open it up a little bit, and that connected to larger Latino communities in the U.S. And and you know, in the film they mention, you know, it's like there's Gotham, right, for Batman, and there are these like non-existent abstract cities,
right,
and I thought that was really cool. I thought in a way that's putting, you know, like Blue Beetle on that level of this is a new kind of mythology, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned that, and that's funny. I just didn't really think about that. You have Gotham, which is a fictional city, Metropolis, which is a fictional city for Superman, and then now Palmera City for Blue Beetle, and they're all up there as these abstract places that, you know, we now have as Mexican American or Latino people to look to as in the superhero world. So it's fascinating. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see what they do with it. I think there's a lot of potential there, and who knows what they'll do with it. But I personally liked it in that way, and the comic is really good.
Yeah,
I think it's fantastic, and the you know, the part that people I think don't pay a lot of attention to, I don't know, maybe they do, but for me, what's cool about the comic is it's sort of like a little bit of a coming of age story, and it's kind of about his body, you know, Jaime Reyes, and suddenly his body is sort of like controlling things, and yeah, not to make it too explicit, but you know, it's like your body kind of takes over, and but then the arc of the series is about him learning to be in dialogue with the suit.
That's true.
You know? Yeah, and so that they have some kind of balance. In the beginning, you know, it's just like, you know, the suit controls him and destroy. And I think they brought some of that into the film. It's a little bit more subtle, but it's there. It's there actually. I mean, there's a love story part as well. So I think it helps in that way. But I don't know if that's something that you kind of picked up on or you've heard people talk about. But I think that was a kind of cool way of dealing with like growing into your body.
Yeah, you know, that is true.
Connecting that to having a suit.
I'll be honest, I haven't seen the movie yet. So I based all my stuff off of the comic books, which you can probably see behind me. And what I've talked to the newest writer, Josh Trujillo, about. But yeah, it definitely is a coming of age story. And I can totally see what you're saying about learning to not just live with your body, but accept your body. So like body acceptance, you have body to accept that this is your life now, I guess, and this is how it's gravitating towards. And they do it in a real fun way, of course. Yeah. But that's very true. I didn't even really put that together, but yeah, that's a very accurate statement for it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's kind of the heart of the comic in the sense of what's driving the character, you know, to a degree. And there's always, you know, like the superhero stuff and the crime fighting and the conspiracy or whatever, but in terms of the human, you know, like what are they dealing with? How are they dealing with it? That I think that's important to look at as well.
Yeah, that's very true.
So that's the one I've been thinking about. What else? Well, like I said, I reread Ink the other day, which was really great to pick that up again.
That sounds interesting. I'll have to look that up. I mean, of course, it's always a dystopian future it feels like that we're living in that right now, right? In a way, to a degree. So I'm curious to see. I'll check that book out.
Yeah, and then also, like I said, we're reading for the next fiction anthology. So that is, and I'm a little bit behind. So I gotta get back going. So yeah, I think that's what I've been doing. Yeah.
Well, really cool. Well, if people want to stay in touch with you or follow along, where can they find you? Your website, I think, is LatinXarchive.com.
LatinXarchive.com. Yeah.
And are you on socials anywhere? Of course, Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah. Instagram, Facebook, not Twitter anymore. So yeah, I mean, you can look up, Matthew David Goodwin, and then any of the books, you'll find me. LatinX Rising Speculative Fiction for Dreamers. LatinX Visions is kind of the big, huge project that is coming in the future, where we're going to be, forming a kind of committee to, keep that dialogue going on in the future between, universities and authors and artists, which I love. I love that kind of dynamic. Sometimes there are like boundaries between those different groups, which doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah,
very cool. Well, I will be sure to link all your stuff in the description box below here, on YouTube and whatnot. But thank you, Matt. Thanks for taking some time to chat with me today. I really appreciate it. I look forward to picking up. I think I have your LatinX Rising in my cart on the website now to buy it. I saw that the forward was done by Professor LatinX, which is really cool. He's a friend of the show, so he's really, really cool to see that. So thank you again. I really appreciate it.